Oh my God! Oh God! How we doing, everybody? Oh, my neck. That was such a weird day. I've had such a weird day. How are we all doing? Welcome into the Witch Hunter stream. Sorry about that for anybody who joins. We always start with a ritual. It always begins with that. Sorry if I just jump scared you. Dude, I'm about to hit stream. I'm like, okay, ready to go. I'm fucking setting up everything. And you know what happens? Do you know what happens? I get a notification on my phone. My provider has decided to have an outage in the internet for the next like 20 to 30 minutes. Your Wi-Fi will now be going down for this amount of time. And I'm like, no! It was terrible. It was just awful. But, oh my God. Let me just say this before we start. Witch Hunter is such an amazing boss fight. And if you don't know that yet, then I hope I prove that in this stream. I love this guy. I love this guy so much, I could only do this boss fight for the rest of eternity. All right? He's awesome. And I literally don't have a run that's not fun with him, right? So I'm starting up my Toontown. I'm starting up my Toontown Corporate Clash, and we're going to do a bunch of Witch Hunters, okay? Oh, God. Oh. But how's everybody's day? How's everybody's day? I had a really weird day. I had a really, really, really weird day. Big news for me. What's up, Flex? What is up? Tell me about it. I'm at the sea? That's pretty hype. Tell me about it. Which sea are you at? Which edge of the what edge of the country are you at? My resume is almost done. Air horns. That's huge. That is huge, Flex. Might have been pretty but this is gonna make it better. Witch Hunter content. That's what I'm saying, Dream Reapers. That is what I'm saying. God, it's good to be back. All right. I'm going to turn on my game volume. That's terrible. There we go. Okay. Why am I in the berg? Oh, yeah. I had to do 40 billion Oklos. Oh, my God. Man, Oklos are great, but... Man, G Wilkers. Oh man. Oh gosh. I gotta tell you, these were so annoying to get. Holy, these were annoying to get. At least you get 70 dice from them now. True. Actually, legitimately true. All right. So now, the bread and the butter. People that I'm going to harass mentally, physically, emotionally. Some of my favorite people of all time. The people who created this boss fight. Oh. Ooh. Oh. Hey.
Hello,
gamers.
Oh my
Hey.
God. Actually peak game designers. My favorite game designers. What are you guys doing?
Thanks.
Too much.
That's so kind of you.
Thank you.
How about you guys introduce yourselves to everybody?
Yeah. Sure. I'll start. I'm Trip. I was game design lead during the time of 1.3. I am now just a game design member, just due to some stuff going on. But I'm here. Did a lot of game design in 1.3 and continuing.
I'm Jay Knight. I was also a game design lead once upon a time. But Mostly during 1.3, I did a lot of the cutscenes for the instance managers and chipped in with the design on fights here and there, including when we were doing the reworks to Witch Hunter post launch.
God, such a great rework.
What's poppin'? My name is Crazy. Y'all know me as the Red Riru around here. I'm not on game design lead, but I am in game design. I did a lot of work in 1.3, April Tunes, and the recent 1.4 update.
Oh, God. I just can't tell you guys enough. This boss fight's so goddamn cool. I literally... It's actually good. I've got a lot of questions, first of all, right? And I just want to ask first, what was the initial, like, was there a vision for this boss? Right when you, like, know what, like, nothing for what he looked like, but what was the first thing that, like, started the baseline for this guy?
So early on when we were trying to design the managers, so I'll just come right out and say it. There was a period right before I started really heavily working on it where I had just joined game design, and we took a second look because we had a base idea of what we wanted all the managers to be, and then of course, as you do, you know, we looked at those and went, let's redo them all because we don't want any of that. And so then we sat down and we looked at all the managers again, and the first thing we really wanted, and we pushed for with Witch Hunter, was a design where you're fighting like a mob, because he's, the leader of the mob. It's the Witch Hunter. It makes sense. But we wanted that, like, overwhelming feeling of the mob. That was the core idea for, like, design philosophy on him.
And something for the mob, right? What went into, like, designing how that worked, right? With what showed up and, like, how it affected him as a boss.
So are you asking, like, the technical implementation, or are you just asking, like...
More so just in, like, what was the entire idea of, like, how it worked, when it grew, how it would affect him in his, his will of the people, exactly, like, who showed up, and just the cogs you guys had the idea of, like, how much would they affect the fight for just him, right? Right at the beginning of his an entire idea,
Yeah, so I don't want to do all the talking, but just for your answer, with this mob mentality, the mob originally in the fight didn't do a whole lot with him, and how, like, it didn't do a lot for him as a boss in his first inception. It was kind of just, yeah, he'll summon a lot of cogs. Because there's another honest point here. We went through a really big, I think, growth spurt as a team, game design did, during this update, where all of a sudden we had much more filled out ideas for bosses from what their original conception was. Managers were not what they are now when we first wrote down their ideas. And so in his first iteration, the mob part of his fight was really just like, oh yeah, there's going to be a bunch of cogs in the fight to back him up. But obviously, as we went along, we decided that there was a use for the mob, and that there could be, certain breakpoints for him, and the mob should actually empower his benefits. Like, the more he has a mob, the stronger his energy, or his will to fight, I guess you could call it, is. So.
And something I noticed really early on when fighting Witch Hunter my first few times, right, was just how much stuff kind of happens in that fight, which isn't so much, like, explosive and showy, right, like a lot of the other managers, like Dave Brubot or Chainsaw or something like that, right? And, just, like, that goes down even to his, like, design, right? Again, at the very beginning, a lot of people weren't so crazy about the guy who's got the hat and the mask, you know what I mean? But I think he looked really original. And in terms of that, like, just his design as a cog, right? Where did that come from?
So the Witch Hunter design, I actually got permission. I don't know, Ace, are you able to like share images on your stream or show them?
Yeah, hold on, let me grab some.
All right, I got permission from the team to use a couple pieces of art and show you some of like the earlier things. I'll put them in our little chat that we had.
Yeah.
Let's see.
We got the art. Let's go.
Yeah, we got some behind the scenes art of his earlier inceptions and stuff. I won't show the videos because those might be a little awkward. But these are some of the early designs for Witch Hunter, some of his early concept art. If you pull them up, of course I'm not the creative team, and as much as I'd like to speak for them, I won't totally go into the details of like who designed it and what their design process was, but there is very clear iterations of like, you know, he's got that cauldron for a mouth, and he's got the big medieval kind of hat on his head. So
Let me pull this up here, everybody. Here we go. Oh yeah, I mean, again, it was just like, there was something so, for me, like when he came out, there was something so interesting about him, you know? Because his design was so like, you know, I feel like a lot of bosses, right? A lot of them kind of go their own direction, what they look like, especially 1.3. But there were a few that were like rooted in that playground, you know what I mean? And like Dave Brubot, Plutocrat, and like Witch Hunter were some of those for me. And I think his design was super interesting, you know, to hear like, you know, how it was created, how it was done, and then how it was like, it kind of implemented into his cheats and how his fight went, right? And just, especially for after that, right? I think, hold on, they're trolling my Witch Hunter fight. Just like, after his full design, what was like the first few things after the mob that you wanted to, like, that you then added into this fight, right? That you added to kind of make it more than just the mob, you know?
So I can tell you what kind of sparked, like, what kind of sparked what it is now. So for the most part, Witch Hunter had like the least love, I'd say, compared to most of the 1.3 managers, like when we were working on the update. And we were just watching some of the reaction videos to the managers, and we were watching Stuck the Duck's video. And in his video, he kind of just completely ignored like the cogs because like there wasn't really anything better to do, right? Like, and like you just hit him over and over again, and we realized that, you know, we need to do something a little bit better for this guy. And we kind of expanded more on the mob and made it like uncap all the way to 16 to create like a sort of second phase kind of. And then we also added the will of the people defense to make it so like he's a little harder to focus down and put a bit more focus on like actually killing the mob.
And that was something too, right? On launch, a lot of people didn't have the greatest opinion on Witch Hunter, right? And that can go for a few bosses. But a thing that I really love about Witch Hunter. By the way, Corky, thank you for the bits. Really appreciate it. You didn't have to. Something that I love about this guy is your guys' ability to kind of build upon what he had and make this fight super original and have so many layers to it, you know? Going into those, like, post 1.3 changes, who, like, spearheaded that? And, like, what was the entire kind of vision for you guys of what you wanted to add to it?
I'd say it's pretty much everyone in the call, like Trip, Jay, and I. We kind of looked at the fight and we were like, damn, this place lives like this, you know, something like that meme. And so after like spending a bit of time, like thinking about what we can do, we just came up with what we have now.
They're still trolling my witch hunter fight.
Yeah, part of it was like we kind of felt like there were some aspects of the fight that were not very engaging. Like again, you, just to focus him without the will of the people defense, but also like stuff like bewitched or wait, what was it? It was
Bewitchment.
the fire
Trial by fire.
time.
Trial by fire.
Yeah. Trial by fire, like just the fire debuff, both from that and boilerplate, reducing the damage he dealt. Just
Oh yeah, I
like
forgot that was a thing.
yeah, and just there wasn't a lot to it. It just kind of felt like you were just trudging through the fight. So basically, we wanted to do stuff to like mix up the strategy based on like what was happening in the fight. And one of the big things that we did for that was adding the advocates. Because before it was like you sound through the fight, the level range was a lot lower on the fight. But the idea was like, okay, it's a mob fight. Like you have to be able to clear out the additional cogs, but we didn't want a bunch of really tanky cogs to join the fight because that'd be annoying when it's supposed to be about like clearing the mob. So it's just like, oh, then we can have like the idea was to have some logic where every so many cogs there's a really tanky one. So we tried that for a bit and we settled on making it an advocate since they're very tanky but they have lower damage. So like even a higher level one isn't as too much of a threat, especially since this is an earlier playground fight.
And I remember playing Witch Hunter that day of his first sharpened pitchforks, and that was the funniest experience of my life. I died like 11 times.
11. Yeah, he was definitely overtuned, but
it was
those.
yeah, it was I loved it though, right? I really loved sharpened pitchforks, and at least where the idea was, Hold on, I'm also getting trolled again. There we go, yeah. I definitely loved where it was going, right? And something that I find just super interesting about the fight that I think when people say, right, like, Witch isn't that unique. He doesn't do many unique things, right? I always look at his Will of the People. I think his Will of the People is extremely unique in what it does, right? And it can completely change the fight and how it works. Because every single set can change every single turn after that. You know what I mean? And the way you handle it. And I think just Will of the People, when people ask, what's Witch Hunter's main cheat, right? Mob mentality and Will of the People is extremely unique in that manner, right? And just going into like the numbers now, right? What was the kind of viewpoint for like the people you saw doing this for the first time at whatever time? By the way, you guys might need to pop Unite here because 2 of you are about to die. There you go. Just going into like the numbers and stuff like that, right? And this is probably post the first sharpened pitchforks. What was the entire intention there that you wanted to make this like much more of like a, what's the word? Like a very optimized way of kind of clearing the trash when you want to and you don't want to, you know what I mean? Like for the damage reduction stuff like that, how was that handled, right? Post sharpened pitchforks.
Up until 1.4, it's been kind of kept the same, I'd say. Do you want us to like go into detail with like the recent changes, like 1.4? What we did to
I
it?
mean, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
So you've probably noticed, but initially it started at 30% damage reduction, And so because of the bewitch change where you deal more damage to him, like people are gonna start focusing more and he'll die way quicker. And he already dies really fast if you do focus him. So like we upped that to like 40%. But in general, like we decided around 30% before because it just seemed like a decent number. It wasn't too high. But it could increase if you kind of let it get out of control.
And I think especially there were just some people who saw those streamers or content creators who did him the first time and did him where they didn't really look at that number at all, ever, throughout the entire fight. And it led to kind of just a weird slog of the fight, which gave a lot of people the kind of opinion that it wasn't the fastest of fights, right? And a bit odd look at it, right? And you know, I try my best in Clash Court, and I'm sure a lot of people know this, that I goddamn fight for the right to never trap the cat ever in all times, right? Because, you know, it wants you to do that. It wants you to kill this cog at the wrong time. There's people talking about how they like boss fights that kind of subvert what you think you want to do, right? And I think Witch Hunter does that really well, right? And going into just like other managers, right? Were there any other managers' cheats that kind of gave you an idea for Witch Hunter while he was being created?
Not really, I'd say, because we tried to work with what he had. You can go.
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, like we did say earlier that Witch Hunter wasn't like given a lot of love at first. I think that was also, you know, simultaneously true from the community and internally to some extent, because like he was done first, like a lot, like Witch Hunter was done pretty early compared to some other managers. So like we like learned a lot through making managers, and then like the later ones that we made, like Pace Setter and Chainsaw, those were some like later ones that came along in development. We used like all we learned to make those really, really good, but we didn't like fully go back to really refine Witch Hunter until post launch with like the resharpening and all that.
Yeah.
So I think
go
that's
ahead.
kind of how that ended up.
Yeah. Especially for like in 1.4, I love what you guys did with Witch, right? It was definitely a little nerve-wracking because there are a lot of people who aren't the biggest fan of Witch because they do still do the kind of way that, you know, they fall for the Witch Hunter trap, right? They make the fight a lot longer than it needs to be, and aren't the biggest fans of him in, you know, in community places. And I definitely love the kind of bewitchment change. I think him getting damage up is good, right? By the way, someone might need to hover here. Also, proccing fire will never kill you. As for like his trial by fire and bewitchment and just the cheats that he'll put on your tune, right? Were those ever like, what's the word? Were those ever just generally, did they ever have a previous idea that got changed? You know what I mean? Do you ever have ideas for Witch that weren't used?
So as for Bewitchment and Trial by Fire, Bewitchment was actually late stage 1.3 development, in where we were taking a second look at the Witch Hunter fight, and like everyone here said, there was a point where we were like, man, this guy is really not getting the love the other managers are getting. Let's give him some more unique things. And Bewitchment became this kind of idea that like, oh, he's picking the target to witch hunt. He's turning them into a witch, so to speak, and, you know, targeting that person and telling all of his mob, get them. And that was the whole idea behind that. In terms of things that didn't get used, he didn't ever really have anything that like got cut. I would say all of his stuff that was all of his base designs got reshaped into something else, but there was nothing we ever like put in that was like, oh, I don't think that this is valid for his fight, that we couldn't twist it into a different cheat or add a different ability on top of. So he never really got anything. He never got anything taken away more than he got things reshapen.
Okay, right, and that's something, right? When I initially played through Witch, I definitely did him the wrong way, but I kind of got a view that there was more there. You know what I mean? There's definitely more to learn about his fight. And just overall, I want to know how like the team felt about his fight going into the game, like but right before 1.3, like a week before, let's say. How did you feel about this fight going into it?
Personally, I was nervous. I mean, the whole team was nervous right before 1.3 launch. If we can be genuine, everyone was nervous about every single boss. 1.3 was definitely a very game-changing update for Clash, and the fights in general I was worried for, but Witch Hunter I was nervous for, and I'll just say this outright. Witch Hunter and Featherbedder I was very nervous about. And it was because we touched those fights near the end. That and Major Player a little, but those were some of the fights I was most nervous about because they got love towards the end of the development cycle. And I was worried that we hadn't had enough time with them, unlike things like Pace Setter, that got so much QA time because everyone on the team loved running that guy.
Yeah.
Everyone was so enamored by running him and having fun and playing on the QA server to play Pace Setter. That was a ton of fun. But, Witch Hunter, as we've seen, was a bit more niched QA, and we had touched this fight towards the end, so there was a little bit of like hesitancy on my side. I was like, oh, this one's going to be rough. So genuinely, I was a little worried about his fight and like 2 or 3 other managers, but
if I could add, I think in particular, I personally was very nervous about Bewitch, just because the status effects type that it is, it can kind of lead to unfair deaths. I feel, especially with some of the previous versions, where like the damage amp was very high, and it made it more likely for you to just get like one-rounded.
Oh yeah.
And like just designs that like require you to like unite. I think are things that it's difficult to design around because like targeting is random. So it's
yeah. I something that I like a lot is not that forced unite usage, but the fact that going into the fight that I'm probably gonna need to use unite, And I think Witch is one of those fights that actually does that extremely well. Because just the kind of level range that it's at, right? I think it's just got so much more replayability, you know what I mean, due to that fact. It's one of those early bosses that still poses that problem for me, even for me. I mean, I've got way too many clears of this guy. And there's still some times that he'll just absolutely destroy me. And that's what I love about this guy a lot, And just were there any things for Witch Hunter, right? Since he's an early playground boss, was there anything that you would like to turn up if he wasn't? Let's say there was no content saying you had everything.
That's a great question. I'd say it would look kind of similar to what like Sharpened Pitchforks was at its peak, but maybe like instead of like the cog being an advocate, it could be some like manager.
Yeah.
Like instead of just like a cat. Like that's what I think I could do if we were like no holds barred.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be something related to like what spawns in the mob, and you could even do some weird stuff like swapping cogs in and out of the mob and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That sounds spicy.
Andriana, thank you for the
Ace,
by the way. Yes.
I got a few questions for you.
Okay.
So like, I want you to tell us like what makes Witch very replayable to you. Like, why do you have over 200 clears of this guy? Like, what makes you get up in the morning and say, "I'm gonna fight Witch Hunter"?
Well, I was kind of talking about it. I think it's just general replayability for me. I think there's the thing that like There's something he does perfectly for me that no other fight does, and it's just the fact that every single turn can change the entire fight. Like the witch hunter I'm in right now is going absolutely horrendously, right? And that's because I'm a dumbass, right? And that's completely fine though. I love the fact that there's these little things you'll miss it, and it's the entire fight's changed for the rest of the time you're in there. And I think it brings a real a just sense of this boss can change so much just based off what you do, and not a lot of people notice that. For me, it's in not just the fight, but also the atmosphere, the music, his character, what he looks like. I think it's just, I feel like when I'm playing Witch Hunter, it's just so relaxing, yet so like just great Toontown that I love to play. You know what I mean? It's got in the moment kind of stuff you need to call and watch, and I can't just go in here with a set 8-turn strat, right? And I know I've got the 8-turn strat. I've got it copied right here. But the thing is, it's just there's so many little things that can come down to it, can change the entire thing, right? And while we were trying to do the 8-turn, so me and my friends, it kind of was just, we wouldn't get it at all. Because there's just these little things that would just completely change the fight for us every single time. And it's just a testament to why I love this guy so much. He's ever-changing in what he does for me. And I think, again, there's just not really any boss that really captures that like Witch Hunter does. And I just think, especially compared to the other managers, he just does it for me. Just a way better way. And I can always come in here and just be happy to be here and doing this boss, whether I'm calling it or not. And it's always fun to come in here with randoms, see how they like it, that kind of thing, right? Also, I think we lose here if Victor does that. Victor should lure. Victor, lure. We got 2 seconds. Does he get it off? Oh my god, he does. That's the thing, right? I just genuinely... He just does everything that I like of in Toontown a way that I don't think another manager hits it, right? And that's not no bash to any other manager. It's just Witch Hunter for me is just so classic, yet such a new take on how a boss works, you know?
Yeah, I think one of the big things I love about Witch Hunter, in terms of just like a design, is that unlike, and obviously I have a soft spot in my heart for every single one of the managers in 1.3. But one of the things that I really love about him is that unlike someone like Dave Brubot, or I always call him Dave, Major Player, or Plutocrat, or some of the other ones where there's theatrics involved in the fight that make it cool and fun and entertaining. Witch Hunter is just pure. It's just go at it. He's ready to fight. And his fight, like you said, there's mechanics, there's deep changing things that are not exactly static. And it's one of my favorite things, just to I love the feeling. I think it was Jay, if you can help me remember, I think it was Travis who helped implement the mob first, or you. I think it was you or Travis who helped implement the physical mob in the sky.
Yeah, so that must have been, I imagine that was Travis. And I made a few adjustments to it when we were upping it to 16 cogs on the mob. One of the things is that I didn't really like how far away they were, out of the camera initially. So when we went to 16, I was just I'm gonna make sure you can see the mob when you're in the gag select screen. So I'm very happy about the way it looks nowadays.
I think that one of the coolest theatrical experiences of the Witch Hunter is the mob. I think that for first-time players, it makes that okay, there's a lot of cogs here feeling, where usually you don't see the cogs sitting behind in the battle that are going to come in, but the atmosphere of there being literally up to 16 cogs swirling around you while 5 are facing you down, is actually really cool to me. I think that's a really fun idea, and that's one of my favorite things that like made me love this fight. On top of, like you said, like his growing mob makes his fight change. If you crack one of his like checkpoints in terms of like, oh, now he has 8 cogs in the mob, at least 8 cogs, and something changes mechanically about him, your next turn is different than the previous turn. And that's all within the player's control.
Yeah,
At least to an
there's also
extent.
some interesting, like, subtle stuff going on with the fight as well. Like, one of the things that we were trying to solve when we were doing the post-launch resharpening changes, was basically like we were like, okay, well, we need to solve for 2 types of players, like players that just attack the witch hunter and focus them down, and also players that spend a very long time just killing the mob and keeping him at like minimal mob size. So like the focusing him down witch hunter was solved by adding will of the people, but the other thing was a little bit solving people that just would clear all the additional cogs. That was a little more subtle. So like the amount of cogs that join the mob for each mob mentality goes up over the course of the fight to help combat that type of player, and then like stuff like that.
Yeah. I think I just think, like what you just said, the ability to kind of get every player and make sure you know what's going to happen for each one of their play styles, and some might be better, some might not be, right? Some might make it take longer, but I think it's really cool that they both can work. You know what I mean? Like, as long as you handle the fight right, they can both work in their own way. And they both feel like different fights when you do it that way, right? It's like, again, like a branching path of what you do and don't do in this fight. And that's what I love about him. Also, Harvey, you're an Oklo. I don't know if you should be messaging me right now. You can hop in the next one, Harvey. So, Drippy wants me to ask you guys this one. As for his character, did you guys ever play a hand in that, or did you guys ever have a vision for his personality and what he would say at the beginning of the fight?
So, to speak on lore writing's behalf and not to speak on their behalf, as far as we were concerned, we were told he was an eloquently spoken, kind of brash, I believe that cogs are better than tunes type cog, because we have the variable difference where they sometimes have a little bit of a conversation with a tune. I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm not on lore writing, and I don't want to speak for them, but TLDR, when the lore writing team and the creative team create a cog, like a manager, for example, and they hand them to the content design team, all 3 of us here are on content design, and basically we just kind of get that boss and we go, all right, so this is their personality, let's make abilities or a fight that matches that personality. So we didn't have much of a hand in terms of determining like his personality. No.
Yeah. Mario, thank you for follow up, by the way. I really appreciate it. Something that definitely caught me on some of my early runs of Witch Hunter, right, was his just, I think this was pre Pitchfork Sharpened, but I'm not exactly sure, but it was a few of my earliest runs. I just found him to be kind of, how do I put this? Like, a newer experience, like I was saying earlier, like a newer experience, yet still, like, a lot rooted in Toontown, you know what I mean? And, were there any, like, things from older Toontown that you wanted to take and put in this fight or make it feel that way, right? Because I don't even know if it was intentional, but there are just it feels like this could have been a boss in TTL, right? If they ever had managers. And I really do love that, you know what I mean? it feels like just a traditional kind of fight, yet so new. I don't know how to explain it, but what do you guys think of that?
A lot of the time when I was trying to guide direction in meetings and stuff, my opinion of this guy's fight, like I think I said before, was genuinely that he, unlike a lot of the other managers, they'll give you a little bit of a talk and a conversation and a moment. Witch Hunter doesn't like the tunes
Yeah. Oh,
and has no intention of ever talking to them really, and will just kind of fight. He's like, all right, you're here, I'm here, let's get down to it. Which I think is what you're experiencing with the it feels like old Toontown, where it does, there's not much in terms of like a real conversational piece or like this clash twist that some people like to say happens to some of the cogs. Witch Hunter just does it. He's just here to throw hands in a way to speak.
God. And I love that. Alice, I don't think he's maybe he is a hateful old man like you described him. But you know what? Sometimes we needed hateful old man in our old Toontown game. You know what I mean? And it's just, and I love the way you guys took, especially story-wise, right? Where you took these managers, right? I love Chainsaw. I mean, we know what I did on launch. I didn't sleep for like 4 days.
Yeah,
That was awesome, right?
Oh no.
I love the story angle you guys took with a lot of these managers. I think they're all beautiful. There's some you can tell that are just, that are thinking about it, gray area. There's some that are just evil, just horrible, horrible people, and I love that, right? And I think even just the personality adds so much to the experience, especially for somebody like Chainsaw, right? That whole experience with Chainsaw, that's just 2 11 EXE cats. Oh my god.
I just saw that on stream. Oh no.
That's hilarious.
Oh, that is crazy.
This is such a Soak the Eagle. I'm gonna type this. Soak Eagle 2 stage. Mid.
What are the chances of that? Oh my.
Safe.
That's
left.
crazy.
That is crazy. Okay, yeah, you got it. Does this kill? 80. Oh my god, it's perfect. God, I love this fight. I love that can happen. That's awesome, right? Because even the cogs that join can change how it goes so drastically, right? I rarely ever zap in that position, right? Because you can usually just sound through it and get the drop on the cat. But when that kind of stuff happens, I love that because we don't get the encore, and now we're gonna do less damage to Witch, which means we're gonna have to deal with an extra an extra set, and it's just something. It just goes back to just it's ever changing, and I love this fight for that because the cogs aren't the main centerpiece, but they can change how it works so drastically because he's so reliant on his mob, and he'll still do the damage. That he'll do damage, he'll burn you, and that kind of stuff. He'll bewitch you, but if you handle it the way you want to handle it, here you go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I think it's interesting in that regard that it the fight kind of highlights the gag changes we made in 1.3 because you mentioned the winded or just like more impact to the different tracks the encore, not the winded. But just more impacts to the different tracks you use. So like when the Witch Hunter makes you change your strategy, it really like all these additional effects on the gags now really have impact going into the next few turns.
Oh yeah. And here's a less Witch Hunter centric question, but now that I've got you guys here, I do want to ask it. Were there any managers that were designed before the idea of the 1.3 gag changes?
1.3 gag changes are an interesting topic because they were in flux throughout us creating the update. So, each manager was kind of made at different points during that process. Like during there was the 1.3 partner QA with the gag changes, and we made a lot of changes afterwards, even going into launch. So like we kind of saw pretty publicly how that sort of thing was in flux during the whole process.
And I think especially just going into the gag changes, even it was so good for the health of the game, you know. I love, especially in 1.4's counterfeits. I love counterfeits. I love the way they work. I think, especially for managers like this and Witch Hunter, I use counterfeits probably the most in Witch Hunter now, right? I think it adds so much more to what you can and can't do to his fight, which just then makes it go even farther, right? Instead of not dropping this turn because you're out of safes, you can counterfeit a safe, right? And going into, like, counterfeits and that kind of stuff for Witch Hunter or just any manager, right? Were there any ideas of, like, how do I put this? Were there any ideas that counterfeits were just, like, a worse option than gag up alls or gag up whatevers, right? And what was your guys' view on counterfeits going into kind of boss fights?
Well, in general, like, gag ups were completely broken. Like, you could watch, like, Kikits lose a speedrun for Chainsaw, and he used, like, 16 pianos in his run.
Yeah.
Like, for the like, 8-minute Chainsaw, like, that's, like, just straight up crazy. And, like, that was only possible because of how busted gag up alls were. And so when we were creating counterfeits, we were kind of looking for, like, a way more balanced option that was also still fun to use and still, like, powerful. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And I did use gag ups in my Witch Hunter speedruns, and I know Cerebral, who did his fair share. I mean, he's got so many chainsaws. And man, I love Chainsaw. But I couldn't do him that many times. And he definitely, it changed his strat pretty drastically, right, on how he handled Chainsaw. And I think for all the 1.4 changes, knocked out of the park, right? By the way, you guys gotta have your thank you. For all the 1.4 changes, I loved them, right? Obviously, Witch Hunter definitely hit me the hardest. And the Oklo one that made me sit there for 3 days straight doing Oklos. That was great. But I think, right, like, were there anything after watching 1.3 and after you guys sharpened and unsharpened again, right?
Just do what I do when I have problems.
What was like the view? Like, was there any sort of type of player that you wanted to change for in Witch Hunter?
I feel like when it comes to pretty much every boss or any time we do a change, we always try to consider both, like, the casuals and the sweats, right? You know, like, what kind of options we can give to the sweats who like a lot of strategy while still keeping the fight, you know, like, easy enough for the casuals. Like, that's kind of generally how we do things. What I do kind of like about Witch is that if you want to do, like, a more simpler strat, like, you know, the strat everyone does where you just sound and then, you know, like, dare I say it, trap the cat. But, like,
God.
people can choose to do that.
Of course, right? Yeah.
What you can do, like, there's so much more strategy potential, right? Like, you can use a Sid Sonata, you can forge a counterfeit, like, forge an extra trunk, like, turn one. You can set up, like, a Bessie and then set up Trap Soak.
And
a lot of cool stuff you can do.
That's something that I love too, is his place in the game, right? You can use Unite and you can use IOUs, but you can't use Susan Fires, right? Which are really good for the ad clearing, right? Also, let's totally hose the Backstabber and 3 Trunk. There we go. His place in the game, I feel like kind of fits the niche of like perfect for his fight, because you can't fire, you can't sue, which is really good, would be amazing for this fight. And I just find that his fight and how it works so well with where it's at. Like, if it wasn't where it was at, I don't think it would hit as hard of like what it would do. You know what I mean? And just generally, like, and this is more like an over-developing kind of all managers kind of question, but like, were there any managers that were solely designed, right, like going into it, like, because I content sync, if, and correct me if I'm wrong, content sync was a later change, right, in the 1.3 development. Were there any bosses that were like personally tailored for the area they were at?
Content sync was later in 1.3. We had done a lot of like one of the problems, if I can just, I think we probably talked about this in one or two other places publicly, especially in like the blog talking about it. But when we were designing a lot of the 1.3 managers, one of the things that like really stuck out to us was man, you come into this fight with 2 pianos and this boss is gone. For example, oh my gosh, I remember when we sat down, it was before content sync, and we were sitting there talking about pre-thinker, and we were like, okay, so how do we make it possible that he doesn't die to 1 piano, but Toontown Central tunes can still fight him? And we were sitting there for like hours just being like, well, what if he was immune to drop entirely? And then someone would go like, that just sounds awful. And like, it was like this big back and forth of like, how do we do it? And eventually we came across content sync. So beforehand, yes, there were cogs that were just balanced for their area. Like, for example, Pre-Thinker was balanced to be doable by a tune in Toontown Central, and you could just walk in with the gags you have at the end of the game and fight him, which is where content sync was born out of. It was born out of the idea that like you could still be strong in that fight and come with some of your best stuff, but you would be brought down to the level where you wouldn't ruin the experience of the fight for the players who are trying to experience it.
Oh yeah.
Newer.
Oh yeah. And I love content sync. I love the entire idea of it. The whole talk of replayability, I think it does so much for the game, right? Again, I can be a 150 laugh tune and run 285 witch hunters where I still die in a few of them. You know what I mean? And I love that because I think, like you guys described, it's just you can go back as a big tune to help out somebody who's doing it for the first time, and you'll both kind of be in the same situation. You know what I mean? It's still an impactful fight for even if you're maxed or not. And I think, especially for max tunes going into 1.3, that was a huge deal. You know what I mean? And content sync was pretty controversial.
Yeah.
And I think after the fact, like really getting a look at it after. By the way, you're so right, everybody. We got a sound. I think looking at it after, it definitely, I think all the positives and what it wanted to achieve, right, and what you guys wanted to achieve, at least from my outside perspective, I think it did perfectly, right? And as for bosses like near end game, right? Let's say Pace or Chainsaw, even throw Plutocrat in there, right? For content sync on those bosses, right? Were there any like, did you maybe buff them up after content sync? You know what I mean? After knowing that that was a thing, you know what I mean?
You want to say something, Jay?
Oh yeah. I want to say a few things.
Yeah, go for it.
But I'd say in regards to those 3 bosses, those were targeted as like the 3 endgame bosses, so they were pretty much designed for like full powered. I mean, there is like a laugh difference between the 3, so like mostly that's like we might have scaled the damage in regards to that, but like in terms of the fight complexity and stuff like that, those didn't really have to take content sync into consideration. don't know exactly how much I should say about our original plans before content sync came into the picture to like make stuff engaging for like late game players. But there was like a previous plan for that, but it would have required like a lot of work, a lot of extra work. And I was the person that brought up the idea of content sync in the first place. And I really pushed for it quite a bit and got some people on board with it. There was a lot of like, it was controversial. In the community, but also internally, there was some pretty heated debate about it. With a lot of the same concerns with like, it's like, well, what's the point of leveling up if my power gets taken away in certain fights? It's like, well, but I think in terms of like the health of content and being able to be engaged with all the content in the game, it really does what it needs to do. And thankfully we had like a good example of like games that already do that, like Final Fantasy 14 being a big example.
I think especially right for Witch Hunter, I think, and Pre-Thinker too. I love Pre-Thinker. Pre-Thinker's another great fight that I just adore. I think the option being there to go back and kind of do that the way you want to do it, like you're still in that kind of level, is like you said, just huge for the ability to go back and play it, right? And now I want to get into like, you know, and I don't know if you guys had a hand to play in this, but just drops from bosses. Did you guys ever play a hand and how those worked?
So I was the one that implemented the system for drops. But in terms of like the way that they work with the drop rates, that was someone else that technically decided that. I don't remember who, but
yeah, the drop rates were kind of like I remember this pretty clearly. There was a big discussion thread about drop rates and the managers and how many times realistically we wanted people to fight them and how to do the scaling of drop percentages, because, you know, how many times do we want a person to play a boss before they feel like they've played the boss enough and not gotten the payoff of the reward? And I think, you know, I won't give any numbers, but I think we're pretty happy. I think where we settled and like where we've adjusted to over time, I think we're pretty happy with the drop rate percentages. It seems like people get them at a relative rate, and you know, there's always going to be the stick out of one person, two people who are like, I have cleared 957 duck shufflers, and I have never even seen the bag. And you know, that's just chance, but
that's actually a hilarious story. Right when 1.3 dropped, Big Al, who was on our Chainsaw team, after we'd cleared Chainsaw, he went to go get some drops from the street managers. And it took him around 64 duck shufflers for his sticker. And he actually filed a bug report for that.
Yeah, the chances are slim, but not impossible.
And I love that again. I love the entire drop system. And just content and being able to play the game, I just love it, right? I think it adds a lot. Also, Dita and Rosie, I know you guys are next, so I'm just gonna hop on the sigil after Wacky Goober goes ahead and figures out if they're going or not.
I love the Witch Hunter love.
And good luck to Wacky Goober.
The solo Wacky Goober run. So on the term of drops and stuff like that, right? For like, I don't want to put this. For like Witch Hunter, right, who got the his hat as a later drop, was that out of incentive for people running him, or was that incentive just another drop. You know what I mean? Because people were asking for it.
I would actually say it was, obviously we see a lot of the desire for more cosmetics. That's something every player wants, is the ability to customize more. That's just a thing a lot of people always desire in games. But even internally, it's not like we specifically only wanted each boss to have one drop, one sticker, one accessory. There was always a desire to have more. It was just kind of implementation in time and fairness. We didn't want to start with like 2 or 3 managers having like 6 drops and only one of them having, and like 2 or 3 of them having one drop only. We kind of wanted to make it a little bit more fair to each manager. This isn't to say that, oh, every boss is eventually going to get up to 6 drops, or some bosses will never get another drop, but over time we wanted to put drops in for each manager. So on your line of thinking where you're thinking, oh, yeah, it was because we saw desire and we also desired it on the team level.
Yeah. I for Witch Hunter, right? I always try to tell people to run them again, right? People who have like opinions that aren't the greatest for Witch, right? I try them to run him again and really kind of like sit down and ask themselves what he does, right? And I feel like with 95% of the people I run it back with and kind of make sure they know everything that's going on, they seem to like the fight after the fact, right? Was there any team debate before he came out, right, about if he was ready, if he was done, that kind of thing, right? Like if there was everything you guys wanted to do with his fight was in the game, right? Was there anybody fighting for anything more or less, right?
Prior to 1.3, I would say that at the end, so again, like I said, there were a lot of Witch Hunter and a couple other managers were right at the end. They were touched up quite a lot. Witch Hunter was one of them, and I would say that the fight for his not being ready, quote unquote, was done before we had that major shift. And because of the time at the end, oh, tragic sound of this. Because of the time at the end that we took to refurbish, I would say a lot more of the team was on board with his release state than we were on board with him prior to.
Yeah.
Like he had a much, he was much less ready to go before we had that conversation, and people's concern of his state was what caused him to get to the better point that he was at on 1.3 release.
Yeah.
He was not in a pretty state before that moment, but obviously what you guys are seeing and what you guys have seen of his evolution over the updates is the culmination of A, us looking at community feedback and being like, and B, there's quite a few of us on the team who play the game and have felt the designs ourselves.
Yeah. And I think okay, all right. Throw Witch. Sorry, we're squirtless. That's definitely something. I think for Witch, right, there was definitely something that hit me immediately, right, with community take of him, was that he doesn't do enough, right? And I think I didn't disagree with it at the beginning. I hadn't really gotten into his fight. Again, I had fought him one time. But I think as soon as you begin to read what he does, and especially after post Sharp Pitchforks, I think he has a kind of his boss fight is so enveloping. It's got kind of like that low floor, high ceiling. You know what I mean? And that's another thing I love about his fight. And it's just his kind of thing, what he does for me, and not just like all the other managers, he has such a, again, low floor, like high ceiling. Anybody can walk into the fight and do them right. They can trap the cat. They can sound every turn. But you can also learn about just like how much cogs do in the fight, the percentage wise, and all that stuff, right? And this now goes into like cog levels and stuff, right? Especially for post sharpened. When you guys implemented the 12s, right? I believe it was. What was the entire view of changing that, the cog levels? And this could go into 1.4 now, bringing it up to 11, right? What was the view on bringing up the cog levels?
So in general, like, the fight was just overly countered by sound. And we brought up the cog levels to make sound spam a bit less of a really good strat.
Sorry, we're getting trolled in a Witch Hunter again. I think, yeah, I think implementing, especially post 1.4, the ability to not sound spam this fight is very refreshing, because I feel like it kind of directs you in a way that it didn't so much 1.3, where you do need to figure out what he does on certain turns, right? Because you used to be able to kind of get by the skin of your teeth if you just did the sound spam and trap the cat and that kind of stuff. But now I think with the 11s, I feel like it does make you kind of want to put in the effort to understand what's going on, you know? And as for Witch Hunter and like putting in that kind of effort and what you want to understand in the fight, right? Were there any boss fights, and this one is more so angled at Witch Hunter, that you thought were too kind of wordy, I want to say? Like, too within, like, you need to read what they're doing and you're not going to see it. You know what I mean? Because that is another argument within the community.
So,
well,
yeah, you go.
my initial thought, and I'll let you continue afterwards, Trip, is just, I mean, when we're talking about, like, these fights, right, it's, like, it's tough to do a lot that doesn't require people to read the effects and understand what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
I think, like, an alternative, like, the only alternative we really have is, like, having an attack or like a cheat that like has a little subtitle that tells you something, but there's only like so much we can do, and that also does technically slow down the fight, especially on like repeat playthroughs if we were to do that all over the place. So it's like unfortunately when it comes to creating a dynamic and interesting fight, there is some requirement on the player's part to inform themselves, and you know, if not enough information is in the game, that's on us. But otherwise, that's kind of just the cost of doing business, I suppose.
And
yeah, I think.
Oh,
sorry.
No, you got it.
I think following up on Jay's point, turn-based games are a very nuanced form of combat. If you look at some of the other big turn-based games, or like games where you can really stop and take your time, one of the ones that comes to my mind immediately is Slay the Spire. I don't know why this is coming out of my mind right now, but like there's information. There's so much going on in a turn in something like Slay the Spire, where you're sitting there looking at so much information. You can just click through, and you can just kind of assume what each thing does and play it. That's fine. But if you ever want to get down to the complex level and make something truly challenging, like Jay was saying, there needs to be something to digest other than just what's happening immediately in front of you in the turn, because all that's happening in front of you immediately on the turn is there's an animation, and this person takes X amount of damage from their total. That's just how turn-based works in general. So putting these more nuanced things stuffed into the corners, makes you engage with the content that you're experiencing in front of you. It makes you have to pay attention to it, instead of sometimes turn-based games can turn into very lackadaisical, laid back, not paying attention type gameplay. If there's not much to engage you in the fight.
Oh yeah.
And so for these more complex fights, like Jay said, there needs to be something in order to read or get a little extra out of. That being said, I was worried genuinely, but we set out with the design intention at the start. Chainsaw obviously has a lot going on.
Oh yeah.
And there is depth to that fight that is potentially and pretty assuredly still not understood by a majority of the community. Which I think is okay. I think that fight is okay. And we set out when we were doing it, there's a meme internally on the team. We had like a 5-hour, 6-hour meeting one night at like 9. It started at like 9 p.m. and it didn't stop until like 2 or 3 a.m. And we just sat there and talked about Chainsaw Consultant for the entire 5 to 6 hours. And just, it was one of the best meetings we've ever held. We sat there and we talked and we designed and we all agreed with the philosophy. Yeah, we agreed with the philosophy that we wanted this fight to be the toughest fight we could make. The most mechanically demanding fight you could make, which I personally think we did. I will praise the team on that. I loved the fact that we did that. Obviously I'm open to criticism on the fight and we've changed it, but I think from the base we made an awesome fight, and I'm so happy with Chainsaw because, again, like you said, it's so complex and it drains you. It really is. It requires you to be there. Chainsaw Consultant is a fight where you can't just sit back. So I love that fight, but I was genuinely worried about reactions to it. Once more people got to it, I was worried that people would be like, wow, you're reading novels in this fight. But I think it turned out.
Yeah,
okay.
I think onto that, right? Like, just Chainsaw. I do completely agree that he is mechanically the hardest boss in this game, 100%, right? And I think Paysetter can be made an argument for, but I think they're both in their own kind of, like, different facets of how hard they are and why they're hard, you know? And I think Witch Hunter kind of falls into the more so Chainsaw side of things, where it's mechanically you need to know, like, what you're doing when you're doing it, right? And I love that about his fight so much. Because once you begin to start to understand what he does and when he does it, you see so much more potential in what you can and can't do. You know what I mean? There's so much more open-endedness, right? As for, like, that kind of stuff, right? Like, the much more mechanical side of things, what was the entire creation process, not just for Witch, but, like, things like Paysetter and that kind of thing, right? What was your guys' take on how that would work within game, with the community, with players? You know what I mean? That couldn't talk in a Discord and were just here in speed chat. You know what I mean?
So, Paysetter was always kind of like a conversation on the team, because we had this conversation very similar to what you just questioned, right? When we were QAing Paysetter, it was so much fun, but one of the things we noticed is that we were able to clear him successfully because we were sitting in voice chats.
Yeah.
We were sitting there talking to each other. One person could say, okay, I'm going to make the calls on this turn. Everyone follow my lead. And coordination in Paysetter goes so far. If you can coordinate what your team is doing quickly, it will win you the fight. And so we were able to do that. So we had this big internal conversation about it. And ultimately, from what I remember, again, this was quite a while ago, but I remember we kind of just came to the decision that, like, you're in the post game. Paysetter is supposed to be the pinnacle of what the game has to offer in terms of the last fight. And at this point, if you're not in touch with the command, if you're not in touch with the abilities that you as a player have to influence a fight, you're gonna have to learn what you can do as a player in order to contribute to the fight. You have to be confident in your choices. You have to be ready to decide. It's up to the player more than it is the team, as much as it is as a team game. As well as, the improved speed chat system and typing system that we implemented with the chat box. We hoped that would help with the communication between players. We also tried to give a lot of extra communication through things like status effects and where tunes are hitting and how they're hitting and how much damage they're going to deal.
Yeah.
Through 1.3 and make that more clear to the player so that a little bit, some of the burden was taken off of players who, like you said, for pace setter, were trying to communicate quickly on a time budget.
Yeah. Here's something. From 1.3's launch, 1.3, like that week, right? Was there anything you guys regretted as a team?
Regret. Let me think about that for a second.
I guess I could say something. While I do love Chainsaw, he's one of my favorite bosses ever. I do think he's definitely more on the solved side. After doing him a lot of times, right? You're just kind of following that same path. He loses that magic that he had in the beginning. He's still an amazing fight. The first few times you do him, he's one of the most fun. But he could definitely be a bit less what do you call it? Following this same path, I guess. I guess that could be one of the regrets.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any direct regrets. I think I wouldn't say anything was regretful. I would more say there were things that I would have wanted a slightly different way. For example, I actually, I guess in terms of regret, and this is a personal thing, I wouldn't say this is team decide. I was not the biggest fan of Deep Diver for a while.
Oh, for sure.
Deep Diver was a tough... Deep Diver, this is just a little bit of insight. When we were developing Deep Diver, and sorry if this is a tangent, but Deep Diver was a little bit of we struggled to get the balance right. It always felt kind of this is too much for a tune in Barnacle Boatyard, but it's also not exactly engaging or it's not fun. When we started designing it, I think we got to a pretty good point, but I would definitely say if I personally could have spent more time on one thing in 1.3, I would genuinely go back and redo Deep Diver's fight or change it up a little bit, add a little bit more to it. That's just me personally.
Yeah. I think going in Street Managers, I think, I did actually 2 days ago watch somebody do a Deep Diver for about 46 minutes.
Yep.
Wow.
It was the funniest experience of my life. We were looking for Deep Diver and they were doing it. And we sat down and watched. And it's, but they got it. They got it down, right? It does take a while if you don't have the gags that the game does think you have, right? Their main damage against Deep Diver was trap and sound, which was pretty comical. And they could not kill a 78Z, right? But they still got by, you know what I mean? And that's another thing I love is you can go into any of these bosses with whatever gag build you want. And especially with the fact now that you can kind of take out your points and put them where you want whenever you want, right? There's still some people who don't have certain things maxed, right? And I find all these bosses are still accessible with all the gags if you don't have this or that or that or this, right? Were there any boss fights that you guys genuinely thought before they dropped a tune should have this gag? Whatever gag track it may be.
It's kind of hard to say because I don't think we really designed the fights over what kind of gags you're supposed to use.
Yeah.
It's more over we designed the fights and then we just came up with the strategies right after we designed it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I definitely find, I mean, I'm sure you guys know this too. There's huge arguments of what gags you should and shouldn't have, right? But I'm definitely glad there was no kind of earlier like bias towards a track, right? I mean, as much as I'd love to show it off right now, I'm definitely not doing a dropless witch hunter. But there's people who do dropless witch hunters, and they're still doable, right? And you can do them as long as you know what you're doing, right? Though they may be a little harder without drop or throw or sound, right? They're still doable, right? And I know there's a lot of people who aren't the biggest fan of witch hunter because they're soundless, right? And I think that's a perfect time where zap can come into play, or just even trap. God, I hate to say it, but trapping the cat in that kind of instance would work, right?
Yeah. The
And I
double
think-
advocate.
Oh yeah, dude. People don't understand in Witch Hunter sometimes that if you trap the cat, a new cog will join, making that entire trapped cat absolutely useless. And it's super fun to see people how they act about it, right? Also, I'm hopping on the sigil right now. And I just think generally, like, especially for Witch Hunter, I think you can go into it, and there's a lot of people who look at it like, oh, I don't have this, so the fight's gonna be harder. I'm sorry if I don't have this, and I can take anybody through Witch Hunter with any build, right? As long as you understand what you're doing, you know what I mean? And that's why I love looking for newcomers doing Witch Hunter, because I love to see their first reaction to the fight, and I like to be there to make sure that they don't get stuck in the 5-death loop with the public group, because that's pretty tough. As for like bosses and how public groups work, going in like groups and that kind of thing, right? Did you guys always intend for groups to cover kind of everything? And I mean like just everything, right? Like street managers, games, all that stuff, right? And how did you guys see that as like just random people getting together with whatever builds? Did that change your view on how you developed any of these bosses?
A lot of the time when we were QAing some of the bosses, we would use like completely random builds. Like we wouldn't use like organized, strategy like predetermined builds. We would always just go on with what we'd have after using like a randomizer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that helped bring it a lot closer to how the fights actually go on live now with like random groups. In general, though, like with what you said before, there's one thing I want to say. Like there are a lot of gag debates that do happen in the game, but in general, like the best players are the ones that can make any build work. No matter what build you have on your team. That's what I definitely believe.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. As for now getting in like 1.4 and kind of stuff like that, right? I don't want this to be completely revolving around Witch Hunter, but also stuff like, major player and the changes there. It seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a lot more kind of cog clearing in a lot of these bosses that were reworked, right? Or touched up. Would you say Witch Hunter had any part to play in that?
So, I wasn't directly involved in any of the 1.4 changes, but I do think that it is kind of a common trend that a lot of the issues we've had with 1.3 managers are mostly the fights that like have a lot of fodder cog clearing, like they're more centered around that sort of thing part of the fight. So like getting that, and I think that's kind of also, you mentioned earlier, you kind of got that like traditional, like original TTO vibe to the fight. I think from a design perspective, that's also an aspect of it where it's like very centered around the foddered cogs, but with the manager kind of spicing it up. So I think in terms of like stuff that got touched up on this update, you look at like Witch Hunter, Multi-Slacker, Bellringer. Those are definitely like fights that have had like pacing problems and might not be some people's favorites, but I feel like them being like touched up here, we started to like figure out a bit more about like how to make those fights paced a bit better, like make it a little less punishing, give the players some more like benefits to play around with for like engaging with the fight in the, I guess, quote unquote proper way, or in the way of like engaging with the fodder cogs.
I definitely love that perspective of it, right? A lot. Oh, God. Yeah, we're totally not gonna kill that, by the way. As for like looking at it in the kind of the TTO perspective, right, and that kind of the fodder clearing, I love how in those fights you can kind of make even the fodder kind of their own battle, right? And especially for new major player, I love him, by the way. I feel like there were a lot of debates about how he was like solved. He was in that kind of solved category of what you do. You click this, that, and the other thing, and you're kind of over, right? And I love that with his changes, there's so much more that will happen. It completely changed what you had to do. You know what I mean? And now, whether you think he's too hard or there's too much going on or stuff like that, I think you guys have achieved the fact that he's not just like this solved fight, right? And I don't know how you guys look on it, but what's your guys' whole view on like the kind of solved versus dynamic kind of fight?
I think there could be like both, because I think there should be like a mix of both in general. Like some people do kind of just like chilling out and not having to like just like having a relaxing fight, if that makes sense. And then for the people who do like the variability and all that, they want to do something new each time. Like those fights should exist for those people as well.
Yeah. Like I know there's a ton of people. Oh my God, there's 2 cats.
Wow.
Again?
Okay,
Oh,
that's
no.
awesome.
Wow. Pummeled by cats.
It's a 90XC at least.
Some people just can't live without their cats, and I guess Witch Hunter is one of them.
And I love the cats. I love the cats in this fight, and I love why they were added, right, to kind of combat that again, that solved kind of feeling, right? And I think especially for the cats, right? I think it adds such a level of even in the moment, right? I've done 200 and something of these guys, right? And when a cat shows up, it gives you that feeling again, like, well, shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love that for Witch, because there's always something that can go wrong, right? And you could say that about a lot of the managers, but I think for Witch, it's more so like, it's not so like it's gonna go wrong and we gotta fix it. It's more so like, well, what do I do from here to change this entire fight going forward? Because now we can't do that. We can't do what I wanted to do, right? And that's another thing that's just super close to my heart for this fight, is just the fact that, like I said, just any cog that could join can completely change how you're going. Also, let's totally not zap this. Let's 1 throw Witch 3 drop. Oh yeah, we're tanking this mob. Yeah. What was your guys like? If you guys had to take away, right, for Witch Hunter specifically on 1.3's launch, what was your guys' one takeaway? Like a positive thing takeaway from Witch Hunter on the day of launch, like after, or maybe after like World First Clear, seeing him a few times in like a main game. What would you guys say is like your public, like your personal positive takeaway from this boss?
I think personally, right, if you're asking each of us individually, my personal favorite thing about Witch Hunter, and like seeing the reaction to him, I think is, I said it earlier, but just the mob. I think the simplicity of there's an overwhelming amount of cogs bearing down on you, and you and your teammates have to figure out how to get through this situation. Um, it's one of the first fights in the game where you experience a 5 cog fight, and seeing all of the cogs that are waiting to come into the fight can really build that like moment for you. Even though, as we've been saying, he is, when it comes down to it, he's much more of like a. There's nothing crazy going on in the background. It's all laid out for you, but it builds that like that moment for the first time. That was one of the things I loved about him when I tested him. I just thought it was so cool. I don't know. I always get lost in the little theatrics of fights, but I personally loved the feeling of like, okay, there are a lot of cogs bearing down. How is my group going to take care of this impending situation in which we have up to 16 visible cogs coming down to continue fighting us?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has any personal favorites of Witch Hunter.
I think in general, like we were all kind of on that bandwagon of where like Witch is like a really bad fight. But what I like about Witch is that if you actually like go into like depth in the fight, like you think of strategies, like he's actually like one of the better ones, in my opinion at least. Like he's definitely like slept on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And god damn it, I get my sword and shield every time I go into Clash Court and talk about Witch. Every single time. And I think that's completely fine, right? If you want to have your view on a certain boss, your opinion's your opinion, and I can't change it, right? But god damn it, I'll still try to change it. I will. Because there's so much to his fight that people will do him one time, and they're like, I'm never doing Witch Hunter again for this, and this reason, right? And it's just like, well, how do you want to fight him? You know what I mean? Because you can't do him that way, right? And I find that Witch Hunter is the kind of fight that can kind of flex to whatever kind of play style you want to go for, right? And I think he's far from solved. Because everything you do, like this one I'm doing right now, I've never done this. In my 200 and something runs, I have never done this kind of playthrough where we zap him twice, right? I rarely ever zap him, but zap's fun to use in this fight. Because it's not just him you gotta worry about, it's the mob and all that stuff. And on that note, right, on the other side of the coin of what I just asked you guys, what's a personal negative of his launch on 1.3?
Just seeing like the design of the fight just really not play out on launch. Like again, Crazy mentioned, or Trip, one of you mentioned that this Stuck the Duck. You know, it's like his video, his first time playing the fight, he just killed Witch Hunter, and he didn't really like engage with any of the mechanics. Like I think the main negative whenever I see or the worst thing to happen when I see a fight is like someone getting through the fight without understanding the mechanics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like I feel like if you don't understand the mechanics and you're not engaging with the fight, then like the fight should punish you for that. Which is like why when the rework happened, we added like the 16 mob stuff where like when you get up to high mob counts, it really punishes you super hard. And one of my favorite things about the fight, even though like it basically never comes up, but I think it's super funny, is what if the 16 cog hive mind, you just instantly kill one toon essentially, which is hilarious to me. Yeah, that's probably the main thing that was a takeaway as like a lesson. It's just like designing fights, and like specifically since it's a fodder fight, it's kind of a troubling type of fight to design. You have to figure out different ways for like people to feel good about engaging the fight in the way that it's designed without it like slogging.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Trip, crazy. Any personal negatives?
Nah, Jay already kind of mentioned like you know how before you could just ignore the mob, but now like you definitely can't.
Yeah, I would say my biggest negative is that we didn't punish enough. We were worried about punishing in a lot of the fights because, again, like I said earlier, I think 1.3 was a really big. I've said this internally to the team. I don't know if I've said this publicly to a lot of people when I chat about 1.3 as an update, but I really think that 1.3 not only evolved the team, but I think it evolved the player base of Clash. I think there was a lot of things we introduced that like were a first time for a lot of Clash players, and for the first time there was a lot of thinking going on, and there was a lot of really in-depth thought about what's going on. Obviously, the litigation team dipped your toes into that kind of like, oh, I actually have to really think about my gags, and I oh my god, I can go sad in this fight, but 1.3 really brought that to the table, and I think we, in some of the fights, held back. And specifically with Witch Hunter, there was times like they were, Jay and Crazy just mentioned, you could just ignore the mechanic because we didn't go far enough with it. We didn't put the pedal down hard enough. We just kind of were like, yeah, let's see what happens, instead of being like, screw it, go for it, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting parts about that is like when a fight doesn't go hard enough and like punishing you, like that's like a negative sounding phrase, but it's like what the alternative essentially is, and I think there are still fights in the game that lead to this state where I think is very undesirable, where like you should lose or like you are losing, but it takes you a very long time to lose. So you're kind of just like sitting in the fight for a long time and you're suffering. Like I think it's much better for the fight to be like, okay, you screwed up, get out of here, try again. I guess a very obvious example of that is getting up to max rev in the first phase of Chainsaw. You're just like, okay, get out of here, try again.
Oh yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah, Chainsaw.
The spirit
Chainsaw.
of that,
Oh
I
yeah.
think, should be in more fights. Sorry.
No, yeah, you're right. I was just gonna add, Chainsaw was our definite dip in the water. Like we talked about it on the team. Like we want Chainsaw to be a type of fight where, like, if you're not gonna pay attention to what's going on, you shouldn't be able to complete this fight.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's why we did the instant sad at the start of the fight, where you just kind of get kicked out and you're like, what happened? And a bunch of people, I remember watching all the first runs of everyone where they'd get up to 10, and I remember we literally sat in the calls and giggled about it in the team, watching people do their first runs of it, and where they were like, wait, I just lost? Like on turn 3, I just lost a battle? Because no, that's not something you'd experience in Clash, let alone Toontown much at all. Was just instant losses like that was almost that. Where would that ever happen?
Oh yeah. And I mean,
So
looking back at our first Chainsaw, we should not have won that. Oh my god. It's really funny because you go back and look at our world's first Chainsaw, and every time I'm like, this is fun to watch. Like, it's fun to go watch it back. But man, were we stupid, right? And the only reason we won was just because, like, before every turn, I think it was Ender who just read out exactly what was going to happen. And then we just called the worst strat ever for it, right? And it did take us a few tries, right? And I love that. I love that there's a boss like Chainsaw that can be in this game that can really just humble you. Like, you have so many years playing this game, and you go in there and you just get absolutely destroyed, right? And for those first 2 months, right, I would go in there and just get obliterated, just destroyed. And I love that, right? And I've found much more recently with Witch Hunter, because there is the argument that Chainsaw has been solved a little more than others have, right? And I find it for Witch Hunter is he kind of still feels like if he gets that RNG on his side, he can still just drop kick you off the tower, right? And that's something I love about his fight. The uniqueness to the fact that he can do that still, right? And hell, I mean, like 2 days ago, I was running this with my girlfriend, and she died immediately. And we were like, well, shit, right? And
Yeah.
it's fun to see that, though. Not my girlfriend dying, but more so the ability for him to kill people. Still, even like this late into development, right? It's just, it's really cool to see Witch Hunter still has that capability. He can still do that, right? And you can have this full plan of how you want to do them, and this, like this, and this will happen. I got the move. Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate it. It's, and like you guys asked, like the thing that is for me, it's just his ability to be so threatening still as a max tune going into this fight, and it's great. I love it so much, right? Is there any boss for you guys, managers, that really hit that note? Now, post 1.4, way past 1.3, is there a boss for you guys that you guys think you just hit the nail in the perfect spot for? A boss that you guys could go back like to as team members and look at and just be like, yeah, we really did it right here, right? What boss would that be for you?
100% pace setter. Like he
Pace
has
setter.
literally everything.
Yeah.
Like he has the variability, the replayability, like the difficulty, like, and like it's like all entirely in the player's like control. Like if you lose in pace setter, it's entirely your fault. It's not because like, oh, a gag missed. I mean, once in a while you get something like that, but like because of you have the 100% accurate rush jobs, like it's literally entirely in the player's control. Like pace setter is, I believe, the perfect Toontown boss in my opinion.
I'd agree. I would agree with the fact that personally, Witch Hunter's my favorite, right? But I think for the overall health of the game moving forward, what you guys like want to do and wanted to do with 1.3, I think pace setter is brilliant. Just brilliant, right? I think now personally, ever since I played Osu while doing a pace setter, I can't do him without getting a headache, but I think he's amazing, right? And I loved what you guys did there. And I just, every update, just small changes, I'm just so excited to see what those are. You know what I mean? Because it's just fun to see what you guys do with these bosses. Even just little number changes, it's fun to go run them because it's just a different experience. Even if for 1.4 you guys brought down just Witch Hunter's evasion to 45, right? It's still just a different experience. You can try new things because of these just slight changes. And I think, like, just there are people up in arms because pace setter lost 250 health for 1.4. And I thought that was hilarious. But, you know, with the gag change and all that stuff, right? With all these updates, it's just fun to go back and do these managers. And I think that's going to stand the test of time moving through the years. It's just you can always go back and do these managers, and they'll still be fun, right? And was there any talk during the development of 1.3 for longevity, like the ability to hold your attention for as long as it could? You know what I mean? And what do you think is the boss that succeeded at doing that for a new tune, old tune, max tune, whatever, right? Personally, what is your guys' take on probably the most long-standing boss moving forward? Do you guys also say it's pace setter?
Yeah. I'd say pace.
I think one thing about that kind of like longevity argument, or not argument, conversation is like, it's essentially, it's kind of goes back to the idea of a fight being solved. I don't think a fight being solved is like really a negative thing if it's designed well. And that does involve having some variability in the fight. So like, you know, pace setter, you know, could you call it a solve fight? Maybe you could. But realistically, the way, I mean, there's a lot of variability, so you do have to change up stuff. But like, you could sit down and be like, okay, you know, there's only so many different combinations that you need to like think through. But performing the strategy is the fun part about it.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
And like, you know, depending on when you're playing Witch Hunter, which is not as an extreme example as Pace Setter, but still, it's like you have these differences in RNG, including like how the fodder cogs spawn that might change what happens. And as you said, it's like, oh, this is a fight where I use Zap. Like 1 in 5 fights, Zap comes up, or however many fights. At least with the way that you like to play the fight. And that's interesting because like even if you played the fight a bunch of times and like you have a solid strategy that you go with, you have some variability. That's like, oh, this is fun. Like I might have done this before in the past, but like it doesn't come up that often. So like you're still like, oh, neat. This is what I'm doing now. I'm glad that I have enough expertise in like playing this boss to be able to adapt to this.
And it's just like, I don't know. I feel like, especially for 1.3, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously you guys were there. Was there ever a talk about longevity, right? Was there ever a talk that like, you can come back and do these bosses 2 years later during development?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of our discussion, some bosses got minor, some bosses got major changes to things that would increase their longevity. Again, I mentioned it, and I'll just throw it out there. I think it's fine to throw it out there, but there was a time in Pre-Thinker's conception where he was just entirely immune to 1 or 2 tracks. And when it came down to the conversation on his fight, we were just like, you know what, that just won't be like fun. Like people will do this fight, get annoyed, and then leave because like it's going to be there's 2 or 3 tracks that just won't be usable in his fight. It'll be limiting. Won't be fun. It definitely, to what your question is, influenced our decision to make them replayable. There are things that we've thought about that were like, yeah, this is a factor of this fight. Take for example one of my favorite replayable bosses that everyone experienced right at the start. And this would actually be my answer as one of the most memorable managers of 1.3, even though it's so simple. I personally think Duck Shuffler nails it.
Yeah.
Duck Shuffler, obviously, like this far into the game, going back and doing a Duck Shuffler is like, yeah, whatever. But just the fact that Duck Shuffler every turn has a chance to do something that is completely decided behind the game's code, and you have no control over it, I think is just so much fun. And the fact that it's mostly harmless, but it's just funny, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I've never seen him get 3 ducks in a row, like continually, over and over, is just such a fun little mechanic at the start of the game that really introduces you to this, like, play on your feet thing. But I think Duck Shuffler's just so much fun. I love him. I love Duck Shuffler to death. I think he's just such a fun introduction manager.
And that's another thing. I've talked to a few friends about this, right? I think Duck Shuffler is by far my favorite stream manager, right? I think a lot of people have weird views of Duck Shuffler because he's so early, right? It's like, just imagine if you had him in, like, DDL with, like, Featherbetter health, right? That'd be insane,
Right.
And I definitely think you guys knocked it out of the park. As the first experience, right, I've taken a lot of people who've never played Corporate Clash before, and they walk over and I say, let's do a Duck Shuffler. And they're always amazed, just like, what can happen? You know what I mean? And I think Duck Shuffler is just such a good, he just does such a good job with, like, grabbing your attention. And you want more, right, of those managers, of those experiences. And I definitely think, like, again, Duck Shuffler was a beautiful pick for TTC and how you guys developed him. I think he's, again, just perfect with really getting players excited for what's to come. You know what I mean? And I think just none of the Kudos managers let you down, right, with that. Pre-Thinker, right, like after Duck Shuffler, I mean, as a first-time tune is insane, right? And it just gets crazier and crazier with each Kudos manager, right? And I just genuinely believe that, like, for that kind of stuff, like, Kudos to street managers, it's such a good compliment to the manager that's coming up, you know what I mean? If that makes sense. And here, let me trap actually. And I wanted to ask this. Were there So, for Street Managers, were they developed post the Kudos Managers, or were they done at the same time?
They were all done at the same time.
Okay. Okay. And I just feel like they complement, like, again, I think they complement their manager pretty well, right? Though they're both two different bosses, I think it gives you a good idea of, like, what you can be up for if you times the Street Manager by 2, you know what I mean? And I think there's no manager that you can say is, like, except maybe Featherbetter for Pace Setter. I think all the other ones have some sort of aspect of each other. You know what I mean? I don't know. What would you guys say about that?
I think there are some parallels. Some are stronger than others. I mean, you could be like, I'd say like Bell, Ringer, and Multi-Slacker both being like kind of fodder-oriented fights is interesting. Duck Shuffler, I mean, definitely not intentional, but Duck Shuffler and then Pre-Thinker shuffling his battle position. That's kind of a funny visual similarity. But I don't think it was intentional at all. In fact, Duck Shuffler was that was a Street Manager that was it was originally not Duck Shuffler. It was something we changed to Duck Shuffler later. I remember because I was just like, we weren't very happy with it. We were very picky about like what was going to be the Toontown Central Street Manager, because again, that's likely the first one that everyone plays.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I don't know, do we want like a duck cog? Do we want like another animal cog? I wasn't so sure about that. I was like, we already have so many animal cogs. Do we need more? But I'm glad that Duck Shuffler went through because he's awesome. But
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there's some interesting parallels for sure between the Street Managers and the Instance Managers.
I mean, on the note of Duck Shuffler, I mean, you guys are launching a Duck Shuffler plushie, and I definitely think if anybody in chat has not seen that yet, go check that out. And I think that was a trippy thing, Phil. I really appreciate it. I think as for like choosing who that manager, like the kind of face of Corporate Clash is, and I honestly have the same answer every time. I think it's Duck Shuffler, because I think there's no other experience like your first Duck Shuffler after playing, like starting the game, right? And I think you guys really knocked it out of the park with that. For me, I think like by my 4th Witch Hunter, I had that kind of realization moment of like, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but like the Danny DeVito meme where it's like it zooms up on his face, he goes, I get it. Literally exactly like that, like my 4th or 5th Witch Hunter, right? But like that's how I envision a lot of people doing their first Duck Shuffler, like after playing Corporate Clash for the first time, you know what I mean?
Right. And he's a manager that everyone can experience at the same level. Like, I think that's what's so special to me about him is, you know, there's obviously talks and controversy about in 1.3 things like the later game managers, even up to Plutocrat. Plutocrat's intimidating for someone who's not confident in their gag selection or ability to lead a fight. Plutocrat can be intimidating. I mean, even something like Firestarter can be intimidating, but Duck Shuffler is approachable.
Oh yeah.
You can approach that man with 2 to 3 tunes, and as long as you build it correctly, you can fight the Duck Shuffler and win, and still have a really funny experience. I can't tell you the amount of fun my friends who hadn't played Toontown in years. I told them, I was like, hey guys, I've been working on this for a while. I want you guys to come play it with me. And we did Duck Shuffler together, and they cracked up when he turned them into ducks. It's just a funny, cute little experience. And it really leaves, like you said, the impression on the player that like, oh my gosh, this is not what I remember Toontown as. This is not what the game was as a kid.
And I can't say like how many YouTube videos or streams where it's just like, holy shit, Hires and Heroes is insane, right? Of somebody who hasn't been playing Toontown, right? And I love watching those, right? I love seeing people's first reactions and stuff like that for all the managers, right? If I see a stream up that says first time whatever, I'll hop in because I love looking at the reactions for any boss in this game, right? And I think back to the longevity thing, it's just like you can go in and experience it, and it's just so fun. I think all of these managers, it's just a really good time, right? And it's just like, especially for Witch Hunter, it's for me, like, if you tell me you're doing your first Witch Hunter, I want to be there. Like, I don't care if we've never met before, I want to be there, right? Because he's just a fun boss to see how people react to him, right? And I love to talk about him and all that, right? For you guys, right? And I know you guys had like QA and stuff with these bosses, right? For, let's say near launch, like your first time running kind of the finished version of a boss, which was the one that really got you guys to like really believe in this update? Like really just say like, wow, we did it. You know what I mean?
Personally, my favorite manager that makes me think like I love this update is Plutocrat. And the main reason behind that is I think his area, not pun intended, but is like the coolest to me. I think going into the pizzeria and there being a little secret shop in the back is so cliche, and it's so cool to go into the freezer and then there's this tiny little guy sitting on top of his double desk with these big, strong, angry, sometimes guys in front of him who are willing to beat you up for coming into his freezer and his pizzeria, and you don't step on his turf, and I just think he's so much fun. I think the element of the fight is fun. I think the atmosphere of the cold wind rushing into the fight and making the tunes freeze and being able to control the shatter mechanics. Like I think that Plutocrat is so much fun that I personally thought that was one of my, granted, I don't know that there's a huge following for Plutocrat and how cool the fight is, but I personally think that like shatter mechanics are one of my favorite things about Plutocrat, and I think that fight made me feel so much more confident in just the design, and I loved seeing people do it for the first time. Like I think oh my gosh, when you guys were involved in that, right? There was a
that was our B group. That was our B
Yep.
group. Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to beat the Plutocrat for the first time. That was just so much fun. I love Plutocrat, and I think he had a lot of fun. That's my personal boss that I think felt for me like, yeah, this update did it.
And it was kind of something for me too, right? Was Plutocrat actually was the first Kudos manager I actually watched, because because again we weren't eating, we weren't sleeping. I had stood up twice in the past 3 days, and our group finally made it to Plutocrat, and I remember watching that, and it was like, holy shit, this is awesome, right? Because it was the first Kudos manager I actually ever watched. Again, I had heard about from mostly chat and stuff like that what kind of bosses were like, right? But Pluto was the first one I ever watched, and it was, again, I completely agree. I think Shadow is crazy, right? I think a lot of that stuff, I love the satellite investors in that fight, right? Pluto's a fight that I definitely think there's a niche side to it of people who like it a lot. I don't know if I'd say there's somebody like I am for Witch Hunter for Plutocrat, right?
Yeah.
And God, if there's somebody like that, please come out of the shadows. I fucking want to talk. That's a great fight, right? And I definitely think he doesn't get a lot of love in the community that he should, but that's not because like people don't like his fight. It's because he's just in like a weird area, you know what I mean? He's in between Chainsaw and Major Player, you know what I mean? He's kind of that road to Chainsaw, and a lot of people hear a lot of things about Chainsaw, so he's not exactly what they're building up for. But he is an amazing boss, right? I think all the Kudos managers are in their own right? Jay, crazy, any bosses that really got you like this is it, this is the update?
I guess I would say like Chainsaw at launch was like the most entertaining. Like watching you guys do Chainsaw for the first time, like in my opinion, that is the best moment in Toontown history.
Oh yeah, for me too.
Like
Yeah.
that was the craziest content ever.
It's it. My first witch, our first witch, or not witch, chainsaw. Sorry, doing a witch. Our first chainsaw definitely made me realize, right? Like, and we did this recently, where it was my top 25 games of all time, right? I think doing that chainsaw really made me think, like, I love this game. It's definitely, like, and a lot of people want to beat around the bush, like, no, Toontown's not my top 25 games. But after that chainsaw, I couldn't deny it, right? I think that experience, I gained a new love for the game, the team, just the art, all of it, right? I love just whenever I hear about any sort of update coming, I will be there, right? I'll read the patch notes. I'll then argue with Ender for 5 hours. It's great. Also, yeah, Dita knows. I think much of Pluto based on what was shown in the trailer, but once I did actual fight, I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I mean, I had some ideas, trailer-wise, right? There were some bosses I was hyped for more than others, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but original, like, trailer, Chainsaw wasn't placed that high on, like, many people's, like, tier lists of who they were gonna do first, right? I don't know if you guys were too involved with that, like, and seeing that, but there were a lot of people who put Chainsaw pretty low, and I remember when we were setting up, because we had, like, these pretty, organized teams of, like, who was going to what playground before 1.3, and I remember our main talk was Yacht, the Berg, and Acorn Acres, right? And we actually almost started with Witch. We almost did, right? Because we thought of, like, the playgrounds that people wouldn't start in, like, their first 1.3 manager, right? We totally do zap this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good call. I mean, you got the first chainsaw in the end, so.
Yeah, and, I mean, especially for, like, where we were starting and stuff like that, I think, like, we were pretty organized about it, and I remember we were about to start Yacht, and I remember I sat down with our team, right, Big Al, Max Barnacle Brains, and Ender. I sat down with them, I'm like, we gotta start Acorn. We have to start Acorn. And I remember they were like, what? No, you're crazy. And I was like, we're gonna start Acorn. We're starting Acorn. And I literally, I got out a sword, I got out a shield, and I fought for like an hour and a half that we were going to start here, and we're gonna do it here. And I remember Ender was on my side, and we did, and I couldn't be happier. It is my favorite moment in Toontown history of when we did that chainsaw. It was just, I don't even know how to explain it. And as for you guys, right, as like a developer of this, right, what would you guys say was like that for you? Would you guys also say it was that chainsaw?
You know, I know Crazy said that. I genuinely think we had to talk about it on the team, but we kept a lot of 1.3 quiet on the team for a long time. There was not much note about what it was until only a few months before, when we started doing the ARG and started like dropping hints and music bits and stuff like that, and having fun toying with the community. But we kept a lot of it quiet, and I genuinely think my favorite moment being a developer on the Clash team was the release of the 1.3 trailer. Like, I don't think I'll ever forget that. I think that was such a special moment because it was just so pivotal. There was so much anticipation. People were really built up about what was going to be in the update. People, had been talking like, oh, we've seen one or two of the managers. What is it going to be? We've gotten all these lore dumps about them from the website, and all the ARG stuff that we did, and what is going to happen here. And then just seeing everyone's reaction to the 1.3 trailer and being like, this is Toontown now.
Oh, yeah.
This is the game we've been dreaming of for years. You know, I saw so many comments about that. People saying, like, this is what I've wanted from this game that I've been playing since I was 5. This is what I've wanted. I've wanted to see this game get this kind of love. And, like, people thanking and being appreciative. I think that is the pinnacle for me. As much as I love the chainsaw moment, don't get me wrong. I was there cheering you on and screaming and laughing. But I think just seeing everyone be like, oh my gosh, this is Toontown now, was, like, such a cool moment. I was like, this is awesome. This is so good.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I love Toontown.
Yeah. Jay, Crazy, you guys?
Yeah, sure. I definitely have to agree with Trip to some extent. Like, it's just like showing off the characters, I think, is the big one for me, because like all the artists on our team are absolutely incredible. They do a great job, and the character designs are awesome, and the lore writing, you're just giving them the big personalities and stuff. I'm like very invested in that sort of thing because I do a lot of cutscene work. So just like people having that like strong reception to the characters, and just like just the huge anticipation after that trailer for people like get in the game and like see some of the cutscenes that I was you know, because that's the main, you know, besides like dialogue, you know, during like cheats and during the fight, like that's the main showcase of like the manager's personalities.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
The beginning and the ending cutscenes. So like I was just like, I have to make sure I do right by like everyone that's like working on the team, by like doing as best on that as possible. And so I looked at a lot of reactions, specifically like in regards to like cutscenes, and also like fight design, because I do want to make sure that stuff's good and refined. But like the ones that I'm most proud of, and just like I'm super happy had like a great reception, is like the chainsaw cutscenes. That one was obviously a huge one. The ending cutscene, especially, I had an idea for like that really special, like swoopy, like camera angle thingy that happens during like the ending cutscene.
Oh yeah.
And like just kind of like, what if we allowed the animators to animate the camera so they can like animate the you know, chainsaw and the camera, so like it looks exactly how it's supposed to. And that's kind of how that scene was done. Otherwise, it's like a lot of manual camera work for like whoever makes the cutscene. But like, we're in points where like it's really important, we can now have whoever's doing the animations also animate the camera, which we also did in High Roller for some parts of the cutscenes, which you can kind of see that paid off there. But I guess like another, since I'm on the topic of cutscenes and I love them with all my heart. Probably my favorite is well, one of my favorites is the pre-thinker intro cutscene. Just the slapstick aspect of it I like a lot, because you know it's Toontown. And just, I don't know, it's funny just seeing someone fly at the board and everyone be like, ha, get wrecked, idiot.
I especially doing chainsaw, right? First, that cutscene, that final cutscene is crazy, right? It's like such an emotional end to kind of an emotional fight, you know what I mean? And it's something that, oh my god, sound just missed.
Oh no.
It's, for me, it was like, I don't know, it was the cherry on top, right? I feel like the cutscenes, like you said, do so much work for the character other than just like fight dialogue, right? And I feel like a lot of that can go unnoticed. that like the love and effort put into doing these cutscenes and how they're done. Okay, yeah, we just 3 united. We are all on cooldown. That's hilarious. But yeah, I think the cutscenes do so much, and honestly, I wouldn't. If all the cutscenes were longer, I'd be hyped, right? I'd love that. Obviously, there's some people who wouldn't like that, but that's why the skip button's there, right? And I feel like the cutscenes do so much that go unnoticed. You know what I mean? Just the camera work, and I remember doing it the first time and saying that the camera work in like the chainsaw one just adds a different feel to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Crazy.
that's a big one.
What was that moment for you
That's
as a
good.
developer?
I guess it is kind of tied between the chainsaw first run and the trailer because there were so many people who had no idea what 1.3 was about even. Like there were a lot of theories and people, talking about it, but no one really knew what we were doing until we actually just showed it to everybody.
Yeah. And again, I remember watching that trailer for the first time. Just the amount of excitement that got in not just myself, but the community as a whole is something that like I've never seen for Toontown. You know what I mean? And I couldn't be happier with how it came out. You know what I mean? I'm just very happy that I was there for that and to be able to do that. Sheldon's dead.
That's so sad.
It happens. It happens when you get that sound miss.
No.
No way he crashed my game. Sheldon, you're not supposed to log out when you're burning. You know that happens.
Which hunter's got a body count now?
Ace, by the way, while you're out of this boss, I had this prepped for the next time you got out. I wanted to give you this to show on stream, especially while you're loading back up. This is just a little funny thing one of our animators sent me. It's early prototype witch hunter stuff. It just shows his rig, his animation rig, and it's kind of a little fun squash and stretch for the audience. If they want to watch that little clip
pull this
of
up
witch
here.
hunter.
Oh yeah.
It's got those squash and stretch animations, and it shows a little funny thing. I'm sure that the witch hunter lovers in chat will enjoy seeing his face poked and prodded by a rig that allows us to animate him. So there you go. If you can show off that little video for him.
Oh, I did not know his hat had that amount of like animation to it. Wait a
Little
minute.
nose wiggle kills
Wait,
me.
the last face is hilarious. That's great. Oh,
Yeah, it also just goes to testament, like Jay was saying. Oh my gosh, I gotta give a shout out. The people who do art and animation and design for this game are some of the craziest and most brilliant people I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
The amount of work that goes into making these cogs look alive and making their characters look so cool is so awesome to watch on the back end from like the inside and like see what they're doing in the process. Oh my gosh. Like endless props to them for making the game as nice looking as it is.
Yeah, and I know there's some people who aren't the biggest fan of like the animated faces, but I just think the time, the effort, and how much more lively it makes the entire world feel, it's just beautiful. I love, and God, pats on the back for everybody who worked on this. Just the amount of effort. I mean, I've only heard horror stories of Panda 3D, but God, I salute you. Yeah, this is amazing that you guys can do this and put it into the game and make it work the way it does, right? I love all the designs of all the managers in 1.3 so much because there's so much, what's the word? Kind of life behind just the cog, you know what I mean? And you know, some people look at that as a bad thing because they want them to be just horrible, evil cogs. But I think that adds a level of kind of more emotion to the fight of what you're doing. And, like, you're looking at the fight and you can see the cog's face move with whatever it does. And I love that wholeheartedly, right? And even just looking at Witch Hunter, who some people think has a bland design. I mean, I'll hit you with a brick, but also I love his design, right? There's cogs, like, again, I salute you if you worked on Chainsaw. I don't know what that would look like in this kind of stage, right? To have the passive chainsaw going and all that stuff. The designs of the managers, for the people who worked on it, you guys did a beautiful job. And I cannot thank you guys enough for what you did for these characters, right? I don't know. Is there anything you guys would like to say about the rigging and what it goes into?
I don't know how much Jay, I mean, I'm sure Jay knows a little bit because he does technical implementation, but Crazy and I can say probably safely that we don't have too much to do with the rigging and the creative side. We just kind of sit in awe looking at the things they produce and go, this looks incredible.
I mean, it's not nothing too crazy on my end. It's not very involved in this sort of process either. It's really just they do their thing, and it's like, hey, you know, the animation works with the model we have. All right, cool. We just got to make sure the animation plays it where it needs to in the game. You know, so you know, it's just like, again, it's only to the extent of like making the cutscene and being like, all right, this is the point in the cutscene where the animation plays. But in terms of actually producing it, I don't know. It's black magic.
Oh, yeah.
They're
That's
witches.
wild.
on the
And
team.
I couldn't, again, be happier with how it turned out, right? I love all the managers, all the designs, right? And here's another question. Design-wise, just off looks, what's your guys' favorite manager?
Oh boy.
I know, a very heavy question.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Oof.
In terms of total, I'll go first. In terms of total design, I had a very heavy hand in the design of Feather Better, and how the fight got changed from when it was originally before anyone in the public saw it versus how it came out. I had a very heavy hand. I remember I was sitting at work at the end of the day, and I was sitting there cleaning up my desk, and I was like, man, I need to do something about this, because we were not very impressed by what we had for Featherbetter. And I sat there, and I remember I went back to my apartment after, and I sat down at my computer, and I just typed to myself on a document for like 3 hours, and then turned to the team and just blasted them with information. Was like, what if he did this? And then it came out. I don't even care what the public reception of it is. I think that alone, with the fact that I love the sleepy owl design and I love owls, I think it just really sold Featherbetter for me. I think Featherbetter is my favorite. Just design, I think he's adorable. I love him. I think he's an awesome cog. I think the design of the fight is really pinnacle for like what a street manager could be. I think I've heard people claim that of him. Like, he really takes a street fight and abuses the mechanics of it, what you can happening on a street to the max. And I love that about him. I think it's like the perfect, like, yeah, you've seen cogs on the street this entire game. This is what the strongest cog on the street looks like. And I love that about him. That's Featherbetter's my favorite overall across the board.
Okay. Crazy.
Still a little sad
Jay?
that we didn't. Sorry, I'm still a little sad we didn't go with the suggestion of making the cogs move faster while he's on the street.
Oh, yep.
That'd be insane.
Yeah, we thought about making them walk faster so that they'd get to the fight quicker.
That would be cool. Oh. Yeah, that would be really cool, because then you start thinking about, like, street manager, street-wide buffs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh. That would be super hilarious, though.
I'd say my favorite isn't a 1.3 manager. My favorite is definitely like the litigator. Like you can just look at him and you know like he's cut like that, bro. Like you can just tell. Just look at him.
Oh yeah. I think pre 1.3, my favorite was Case Manager from 1.2, but before that, there wasn't a lot of options. But I think Case Manager definitely for me gave me like a definite look into when you guys started going into Hires and Heroes. I was like, God, these cogs are gonna look sick. I don't know if Oklo had like the litigation team designs gave you guys any ideas. But Jay, what cog is that for you? What manager?
Okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to say that I don't know. I like Multi-Slacker a lot. He's just a little guy. He's really funny. I like the idea for his fight as well. It's another twist on a fodder type fight. I just thought it was cool to have like the foreman mini boss come in and do silly stuff, and like I guess I think it's neat that it sort of inspired the Find the Family stuff that came out later as well. But yeah, I just really like his design. VP son. I mean, I think it's interesting to have connections between characters in the story. So there's like a little more connective tissue, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It's like the fact that Multi-Slacker's VP son and even like Witch Hunter has a previous relation to the CLO and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And that's what I loved about the ARG too, was how you guys went into that and kind of gave the cogs like fleshed out backgrounds the best you guys could, right? From that kind of standpoint. And it was the kind of story we'd never seen in a Toontown game, which I thought was super interesting, right? And I don't know who actually developed the ARG, but did you guys ever have a plan, like a hand in that at all?
There was a group of people that really committed themselves to planning the ARG. I will be 100% genuine and say I did not have that big of a hand in helping with the ARG. I kind of watched because that stuff blows right over my head. I was not good at it. I didn't even know some of the solutions when it came out. So people were solving it in the Clash Discord, and I was watching them being like, oh my gosh, they did that? And I was like, whoa, guys, I saw all of it. I saw all the pieces behind the scenes, and I definitely gave it a good look over, but I straight up didn't know how to solve the ARG they made when it came out. So I was even watching it a little bit unfold. I didn't have that big of a hand.
Okay.
There was a small team dedicated within the team to building and puppeteering the ARG.
Well, give them my love, because that was a crazy time, right? Because that was before we knew anything, and we were at least getting silhouettes of what the managers looked like. That was just an extremely exciting time to be playing Toontown. You know what I mean? And I think that did wonders in terms of just like getting people just more excited. You know what I mean? You're getting more lore in these people, and it's just like you're hearing about Witch and how he like. I love Witch's ARG or his whole thing there on Cogs.Inc. because it's literally just all you learn about this guy is he went into the interview, said, "I'm the best option for you guys," and then got hired. And I love that. I love that there's these kind of characters in Toontown, but I also love how there's just like varying characters. You got Dave Brubot, you got Chainsaw, you got Rainmaker. And that's what I love about 1.3 is like the stuff that can come out of it. You know what I mean? Like the story, doing it yourself, watching it yourself for the first time. It's all just extremely exciting, you know?
Right.
I don't know. Was there any story, right? I know you guys probably didn't have a hand to play in this, but Was there any story for you guys, just like dialogue or any of that, that really made you love a certain manager's character?
I'd say Chainsaw has a really cool story.
Oh
I
yeah,
definitely jive with him.
Chainsaw's great. I love everything
And-
about Chainsaw.
I think my favorite dialogue from a manager is going to have to be Duck Shuffler.
Yeah, yeah,
I
I
think
get
just
that. Yeah,
like reading his quotes, he's one of the only managers that when I go back and play it, I'll like read what he's saying to giggle at it because he just says some of the most insane like what are you talking about quotes when he says things. And I love that. I just think it's so much fun. I think he has some of the most fun dialogue out of any of the managers.
I agree. Yeah, Duck Shuffler's just another
Yo,
one where
is
it's like your first boss fight and he's saying this shit. It's really fun to do.
One other little note I wanted to drop in there, just as kind of like a culmination to 1.3, is that I think it didn't get overshadowed because there was a lot of controversy, and I remember all the discussions, and obviously partner QA played a big hand in rechanging us. And the team is so thankful for everyone that participated in partner QA and gave opinions and voices and stuff. That's what we were trying to glean out of it, but. I really want to say one of the things that 1.3 that I think gets overshadowed from the manager perspective, just like or not the manager perspective, but like the game perspective, is that I personally am so proud of the team for gags, how gags lined up in 1.3. I think I remember playing 1.3 after we put in all the first round of balance changes before partner QA, and I remember saying to myself like. The fact that I can use these gags in such a variable way now, like obviously it's still Toontown, obviously the gags are still pretty simple at their base, but I feel like one of the things that went overshadowed is that in 1.3 the gags in Clash coordinate a lot better with each other than they ever have in Toontown.
Yeah, gag ordering is a big one of that. I remember it was like, should we put sound last?
Like sound going to the bottom and switching around the order, like yeah, it really changed Toontown. Like it changed how it felt, and I was actually so happy. Like you can combo sound with squirt zap. You can combo drop with throw and zap on a turn, or throw buffing the gags below. So many, you can use a tune-up as a visible lure buff now. Like there was just things that mattered, and like dazing with trap. It was more than just the one-dimensional turns that Toontown used to give us, where it was like, on this turn, my best option is a TNT. Now there's at least some depth to the gag you click 3 turns later,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that was something that like was so near and dear to me that like we healed a system that I think was very flawed for a long time in Toontown, being the gags. I feel I obviously I've seen controversy, and there's people who are like, yeah, this gag's still not good, or this gag's worse. But I personally think that every gag, like we were saying way earlier in this little conversation we're having, I think every gag is viable. I think you can run the game through with any build you want that incorporates the player.
Oh yeah.
And be successful if you try and use the gags to the most of their ability. I think it's awesome. I really think gags went a long way, or evolved a lot.
Yeah, and there's like definitely like multiple fights where like for each track where it's like an optimal track to have at least, right? So they at least get like a bit of play, and like you can use pretty much any track in any fight, to some extent.
Oh yeah. And I just like how, especially for endgame, the option to switch your gags around whenever you want, right? I find that so relieving as a player, like, because you can just, right, before 1.3, I was I was squirtless, tune-upless, right? And it was a pretty big hassle to change your gags and make sure you got all this, and you got to get these points, you got to buy them with jelly beans and all that stuff, right? And I think endgame now is at a place where, you know, you put in the effort to max these tracks, so you can use these tracks, and you can switch around what you want when you want. And it loosens up the play for, again, endgame people doing these early bosses. They can switch around what they want to do when they want to do it. And I just really enjoy the state that's in with that, right? Is there anything you guys would like to say about just general content sync and endgame play for tunes?
I think stuff's in a pretty good spot right now. Like, there's nothing really like too much that's like overbearing or like, you know, like overtuned in terms of gags. I'd say.
Yeah.
Like every gag has their like use and reason to use it as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Is there anything you guys would like to say to the people here, just in terms of 1.3 or something I didn't ask?
After watching this stream, has your opinion on Witch Hunter changed?
True.
Are people in the chat Witch Hunter stands? Do you guys like Witch Hunter? Are we more of a fan? The first thing I see is a no. That's
The
really
first thing I see
reassuring.
is a no.
We lost.
We lost. It's over, guys.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's over.
Well, now I've got to harass whatchamacallit to get on and do a Witch Hunter with me.
It's okay. That's okay. I think the only thing I'll really say to people is just like, you know, it's Toontown. But at the end of the day, like, as corny as this sounds, like, thank you. Like, supporting the team, like, showing that you're interested and, like, playing the game is really the only thing we get out of this. Like, a lot of us really love the characters we make, we love the fights we design, but, like, seeing the community get excited about the things that we design and, like, people engaging and enjoying in it and, like, being excited, that's, like, one of the best things ever for us. So, like, thank you for that. Thank you for supporting Clash. I think it's just really cool. It's really cool to see that happen because it's a totally volunteer community, and the stuff the team does is amazing. And I am so happy when I see the team get praise because it makes my heart happy for the people that pour effort into this game that we all played when we were 10 and come back to.
So true.
And I gotta say, I mean, on behalf of everybody here, right? You guys do something that I can't thank you guys enough for, right? You bring you bring this childhood game and you just build upon it in ways that make it so much more fun. You know what I mean? In modern times for a game, right? You guys can cultivate this community and you just bring this content that always brings a smile to most of our faces, except for the people who don't like Corporate Clash, which in my case, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not sure why you're here, because we all love Corporate Clash. And I just, again, it's stuff like this where we can just get in call, talk about it, and I love the team working on Corporate Clash. Again, it's just all volunteer work of, again, our childhood game, and you're just making it an amazing game moving forward. Just out of love of your hearts for this game, right? And I cannot thank you guys enough for that.
Well, you're very welcome, Ace.
Well, Priscilla also just died as soon as I said that. Well, we two-man this. Easy.
I'm surprised you went along with the trio.
I have trioed this fight. I would say Witch Hunter is probably, he's in there with Paysetter with probably the most undoable duo. Just because the way he's set up, you cannot kill Cogs fast enough to do the duo at all.
Yeah.
Whenever I watch streams like this, it makes me excited to play next time, and I love that, right? You know, I'm sure these guys love to hear that as well. And it's just, It's not the team and the community and just the people who put the effort into play to make it all that. It's just it's such on another level for me that Toontown Corporate Clash has become one of my favorite games of all time. And it's I mean, you guys are one of the only games out there that has a team that I love. I love all you guys that work on this.
Thanks. Genuinely appreciate the player base.
Yeah.
If we didn't have you guys, it wouldn't be as exciting to do. Like we all said, seeing reactions to things like the trailer, the managers, the gag changes, all of it is what keeps the ball rolling on our end. It's genuinely what keeps us being like, yeah, let's go for the next thing.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. I think. Do you have any other questions for us?
No, but if the chat would like to ask anything, I mean, now's your time.
Sure.
Think about ARGs because not interested in ARG stuff. Once I got a good enough CPU to run a virtual machine, I could ball. Well, that's good to hear, Harry. We're also getting just butchered in Witch Hunter right now. It's great to see. Puts a smile on my face, honestly.
Prester's got hands.
But yeah, Corporate Clash, one of those Toontown servers where I can imagine so many different directions to where this game could go, which keeps me excited for the future of this game. Same. 100%. I just died, but I completely agree. It's the kind of thing where, again, for you guys, it's every update you guys put out, it just makes me excited for what's to come. You know what I mean? It makes me excited to play the game. It makes me excited to just sit down with a bunch of friends and just, again, talk for hours about little changes. 1.4, right, was awesome. I love it. 100%. All the changes you guys made, the drops, even just the little bug fixes. Again, salute to the people doing the bug fixes. A huge salute. I love you guys. Anybody on the team, I love you for doing what you do for this community of people who all just love being here. You know what I mean? And I couldn't even imagine, like, the work you guys put into this is awesome. And it's great to see you guys, you know, happy to do it and happy to be here.
We
All right,
appreciate you, Ace.
I appreciate you guys more, actually.
Yeah, I also heavily appreciate all the people who, you know, not only on the partner program, but people who like stream Clash. I think that's so cool. I think playing a game or creating an experience that people want to share with other people is so cool. That's so cool. That like gets me geeked out every time I think about it. But I see one question. It says, Prester taking care of kittens. Does Prester like cats? As far as we're concerned, and I won't speak for the lore writers, but as far as I'm concerned, yes, Prester likes cats.
That's so
He does
based.
take care of them. He has advocates. He also has cats. He has little kittens, baby cats. You know, he's one of those old men that takes care of cats. Gotta love him. Hates tunes, loves cats.
Who's the skeleton he's referring to? Again, I'm pretty sure that's more lore stuff, but I'm pretty sure that is Winston. That's the PRR, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think.
I think I remember some people talking about this in the crew earlier. I think that he's talking about Gatekeeper in the intro.
Okay. Prester's so based, I know, right? Cat Grandpa, he's awesome. He's awesome. I love him. I love this guy. I'd love to meet him in real life so he could burn me at the stake. It would just be a different experience. It'd be great.
All right, Trip and Jay, would you say we can call it a day from here?
Yeah, if no one else has any like really pressing questions, I saw a couple pop up in chat, but if no one else has anything like super pressing or Ace doesn't want to ask us anything else, I think if you guys are all set to go, I think I've said my piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
would love to do this again in the future with maybe a different manager. This is really fun.
Yeah, placing focus on a different manager, I would love to do that. I think there's some stuff there's some behind the scenes stuff that I'd love to share eventually one day, and if the team agrees to it and we can get everyone on the same page, then I'd love to do things like this more often. But yeah, just keep the excitement up. There's things I won't say anything because I don't know who will get mad at me. But there's things that we're working on that I think are some of the most exciting things to come in Toontown yet.
Oh yeah, I think, I mean, I'll add this in there. I think how you guys do sneak peeks now and just behind the scenes, really helps the community. Like, just keep the hype. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let us cook.
Let 'em cook.
Let us cook. All right. Anyways, I think I'm all set, so I'm gonna hop up. I also gonna get water and do stuff before the night ends. So.
All right. I love you guys.
3 hours of Witch Hunter.
3 hours of Witch Hunter discussion and other
Top tier content.
All right. I love you
But
guys.
thank you for having us, Ace.
Of course. Thank you for doing what you guys do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd love to do it again in the future.
Yeah, let's set it up sometime.
Okay.
I'll pencil you in. I'll pencil you into the schedule. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
All right.
Gonna be on
Thank
the calendar
you.
for Ace time.
Thank you, Ace, for hanging out. Thank you, Stream. Thank you, Jay and Crazy. You guys are great. And I'm gonna hop out. I'll see you guys later. Have a good night.
Beautiful night,
Yes,
guys.
sir.
Have a good one, y'all.
God damn it, I love those guys. I love those guys. But I need to catch up on a few things. Chickens, thank you for the sub. Reaper, thank you for follow. I really appreciate it. And how'd you guys feel about that? Not a question, but I have a suggestion on the new multi-slacker changes. I really love that fight and challenging, and it's really refreshing. However, I find multi-slacker 1.4 to be a bit too much, where it does not feel fun. I love a lot of other changes, though. I think, personally, for multi-slacker, right? Now that we're gone, we can begin speculation, right? Because now it's just us fans, you know what I mean? We can begin speculation, right? And I do believe multi-slacker would need a rework, but I do wholeheartedly believe that all the Kudos managers are amazing, right? Multi-slacker is my least favorite, right? For specific reasons that I've talked about before. And I do think he could use some changes, but that's in the future, you know what I mean? Ellie Cat, what's up? Welcome in. How you doing? Maybe Prester likes cat tunes more. Who knows? Poggeroni and Cheese, welcome in. How you doing? Let's totally get a Priscilla throw here. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of those witch hunters we were doing during that, I was trolling. I ended up pivoting this morning and realized multi-slacker is actually the worst fight in the game now. I know. It's great. You can cream, Priscilla. I'm awesome. Hope you're doing great. I am. I just talked to the 3 coolest motherfuckers I've ever talked to from Toon Tech Corporate Clash team. Might be a predicament, but Ace, you're the only one with trap. That's completely fine. Yeah, I'm the only one that needs trap in the first place. Yeah. I'm #1 multi-slacker fan. No more. That's what I'm saying. So that's super cool that you were hanging out with them. Yeah. I mean, and I want to do one of those with in the future. And I think in my Discord I probably will hold like a poll on what boss you guys want to see. I mean, on that note, what boss would you guys want to see? I'd love to hold like a big poll for that, and then probably set one of those up again. This is just 3 trunk, 1 safe.